Well, I'm starting to figure out why so many people in this country are so pissed off. And people are, of course, the comments are going to be, well, hey, took you a long time to figure this thing out, you dumb fuck. But at the end of the day, I'm getting a real clear impression now because an odd thing happened this week. I've talked to a couple of people who are management at lot larger than my company, larger companies. Like one had about 1,300 employees, other one's about 950 employees. And I'm talking to them about wages, generally, what's been going on for the last couple of years. And like, think about this for a second. Like, think about how much things are up. Like, mortgage interest is way up. Like, every time somebody gets a renewal, it's not a 4% bump. It's not a 2% bump. It's like a 20, 25, 35. It's a big jump in payments. Every time people have to move out of rent control to a new spot, big jumps. It's running apparently still. Things are a bit down in, slightly down in 416, some parts of 416 and some parts of 604, but it's still a lot. Like the Canadian average increase in rent, if you go for a new rent, is about 8%. Big. All of the food inflation, if you wrap up the food inflation over 4 years, it's coming in between 25 to 30%, depending on the region. Like, that's friggin' huge over 4 years. And the gas price is that's up substantially. The goddamn insurance, the house and auto insurance is absolutely crazy increases. Like, you have zero claims, old cars, and you got yourself a 12% increase if you're lucky, could be more. Yeah, I know some people got low increases, but come on. Like, I've seen the stuff. Like, I'm old as hell. Vehicles are not young. I don't drive a Maserati, and it's up substantially. So, thinking about wages, like, I look at all these increases, so heavy duty. The increases in the last 3 years, so big. These people actually represent relatively large companies. Like 1,300 employees is a real company. Okay. What's been the wage increases these last few years? Normally we try to give at least 3%, the one man said. If they're really, really strong employees, 4%. So I'm scratching my fucking head thinking, one of those years inflation was about 10. Like, what? Like, you're giving 3% increases? And then the 950 employee group, she said, we adjusted some bonuses in the worst part of inflation, like the highest points in 2023 and a little bit at the end of 2022. We adjusted a few bonuses upwards, but because the next year we can always pull them back. It's a bonus, right? It's not a wage. It's not a what you're making every day. So she said, yeah, but obviously, mostly I'd say 3%, 3.5%, sometimes people get promoted, but for the same job, last 3 or 4 years, it's probably not been any higher than 4% ever. So I say to myself, people are fucked. Like, average people are, if you can't get a new job or a promotion or like, how is that working out? Like, we have real wage suppression in Canada. Like, it's clear, significant wage suppression. We are keeping wages down. So if you have a year where inflation is between 8 and 10%, and somehow wages are only going up 3%, there's something bizarre about that, right? That's like literally people are getting poorer. So why? Like, why is there so much wage suppression in Canada? And it's probably been true for the last 20 years. It's just not as ridiculously obvious as it is today. Why is it? And if that's no wonder average people are really pissed off most of the time. Why do they think things are headed in the wrong direction? Why do they think there needs to be big changes? Because if that's your lived experience, that's terrible. That is terrible. Prices way up, wages suppressed. Now, the next question you got to ask yourself is, if we're living in this time of suppressed wages and we've gone through a period of substantial inflation, Why in the name of all that's holy are we bringing in 1 million new people a year? Particularly when a bunch of those are temporary foreign workers designed to do low-skilled jobs. It's crazy. Like, you can't even call it anything but crazy. It's malpractice as a government. It doesn't make sense. Like, it's just nuts. Like, you cannot bring in millions of people, hundreds of thousands of them being temporary foreign workers, which are no longer just ultra high skilled. Like, they're just not the super skilled people who bring things to the economy that are vitally necessary. They are restaurant workers. They are office workers. They're construction laborers. I mean, please, Jesus, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. All right, you can still be mad at me if you want. I did not realize, because, well, in all honesty, our little small company has given some pretty reasonable wage increases to try to compensate for those high levels of inflation. But it hit me like a brick that so many organizations are not, so many employers are not. How in the world do people get by on 3% a year when over the course of the last 3 years, everything else has gone through the roof? It's crazy.